Nolan Wells' Bombshell, friends, lawyers strike back. And right now, that phrase means something very specific. It means three people who were on that island have stopped cooperating quietly and started fighting back. Publicly, legally, aggressively. That's not nothing. That is a pressure shift in an active death investigation, and it changes the shape of everything that comes next.
Tonight, the investigation into the Nolan Wells death bombshell. Joining us tonight, Nolan's friends, lawyers fight back. Who's telling the truth? They think they know. But do they? Him being the Cox. Also with us, another veteran trial lawyer, Edward Pulsick, attorney for the boys as well. Actually, they're not boys. They're adults in the eyes of the law due to their age. Gentlemen, thank you for being with us tonight. My first question to clear up this matter, have your clients taken polygraphs? First to you, Tyler Cox.
Nancy, my clients have not taken a polygraph test. And I can tell you why. Because any lawyer worth their salt is going to tell their clients not to take a polygraph test under any circumstances. Two of my clients went in and made statements with me. We're not going to I'm not going to do a polygraph test because, one, as you know, they're not admissible in court. And so it wasn't going to be admissible anyway. You should never, ever, if you're a lawyer, allow your clients to take a polygraph test. Now, we allowed investigators from the jump to have access to their phones, their Life 360, everything. We have cooperated implicitly every step of the way. But no, they didn't take polygraphs tests. But what I'll tell you is one of the other boys, who I won't mention their name, but I'm sure that you've heard, took one. The girl that Nolan was with took a stress analysis voice test, and so did the other boy. So that's the test they took. Both of them passed. And so, again, no lawyer worth of salt is going to tell his clients to take a polygraph test or anything like that.
Think about what that means for a second. Nolan Wells is gone. His cause of death is still officially undetermined. No charges have been filed. No arrests have been made in connection with his death. And the people who were last known to be with him are now the ones throwing legal punches.
However, I disagree with you regarding their admittance into court. Polygraphs are allowed in civil trials. O.J. Simpson, he flunked horribly. And if both sides stipulate to the polygraph's admittance before the polygraph is taken, it can come into a criminal trial. The reality is that never happens. That never happens.
Right. At the time that we first cooperated with police, the first very week, the days after, just 1 to 2 days after the disappearance of Nolan Wells, we're not thinking about a civil suit. We're not thinking about that. We're thinking about how can we provide as much information to authorities so that they can find Nolan Wells. And it was not until after we spoke to officers and investigators that Nolan, unfortunately, his body was found on Horn Island, washed up. And it's unfortunate. And I hate that for Nolan. Because by all accounts, he was an incredible person. He was just truly remarkable in almost every sense of the word. But, I mean, we're not thinking about a civil suit at that point in time. We're trying to help authorities find our friend, who we can't find either.
Edward Pulsick joining us in addition to Tyler Cox, both of them veteran trial lawyers. He is with Taylor Dykema. Edward, how did you get involved in this case?
Well, I'd rather not talk about that. I could just tell you this. I can tell you that it was through a friend of a friend.
You're kidding, right? You're kidding me. Because when you tell me I'd rather not answer,
well, I want to protect the names that
igniting me to find out how you got involved in the case.
Well, hold on. I can tell you a little bit more. I can tell you this. I can tell you A close friend, a close friend who knows the Ocean Springs, Mississippi community very, very well, is from the area, connected me to a friend of his. And then I found myself speaking to Tyler here. And Tyler and I instantly became very close friends. We both have blue pickup trucks, so now we're the Blues Brothers. We just became very close. We hit it off. Then I had the opportunity to speak to Warren, speak to Morgan, speak to Jax, and we hit it off also. And I immediately realized these are incredibly fine young men. I realized
Okay,
right
hold
away
on.
I wanted to help them out.
Ed,
This is not just a missing person case that turned into a death investigation. This is the story of a legal wall going up, in real time, around the only people who were there. Stay with me, because the details matter. Let's start with what actually happened this week, because it hit different than anything we've seen in this case so far. Attorney Tyler Cox, representing Warren Hudson, Jax Patalo, and Morgan Seymour, went on record, and he didn't just defend his clients. He made a direct accusation against Nolan's own family. He said, publicly, that Nolan Wells's phone has not been turned over to investigators. He said he believes the Jackson County Sheriff's Office does not have access to that phone, and then he said something that stopped a lot of people in their tracks. He said, and I'm reading this directly, I have reason to believe, and I do believe, that the family have not cooperated with law enforcement. I do not think that they have turned in Nolan's phone, and I'm willing to bet my reputation on that. Bet his reputation on that. Now, before we go any further, that is a claim from one attorney in a contested, emotionally charged investigation. It has not been independently verified. Nolan's family and their attorneys have not confirmed it, and we are going to come back to what it means and what it doesn't later in this video. But the fact that it was said at all, publicly, on record, tells you exactly how aggressive this legal battle has become. And it is only getting more aggressive. Here's the question we're sitting with today, and it is not the one most people are asking. The question most people are asking is, what happened to Nolan Wells on Horn Island? The question we are asking today is this: why are the friends, who say they have nothing to hide, building a legal fortress? And why, right now? Welcome back. If you're new here, this channel covers active cases as they develop, with primary sources, court documents, and verified reporting. No speculation dressed as fact. No adjectives where a fact hits harder. Just the case, as it stands right now. Now, let's talk about what striking back actually looks like. 3 friends who were with Nolan Wells before his death are pushing back against scrutiny surrounding the case as their attorneys prepare potential defamation lawsuits. Warren Hudson, Jax Patalo, and Morgan Seymour say they have been unfairly targeted by people questioning their involvement in Wells's death. Their attorneys, Tyler Cox and Edward Andrew Paltzik, told People magazine they are preparing potential lawsuits against individuals they believe have spread false claims about the friends. That is the legal ground they're standing on. Defamation, not silence, not cooperation through counsel. Active, named legal threats against specific people for things said publicly. And then they did something else. Something that is either incredibly bold or a very calculated move, depending on how you read it. The friends' attorneys headed to Horn Island to get a first-hand look at where the 18-year-old disappeared and where he was found dead. Attorneys Tyler Cox and Edward Andrew Paltzik told TMZ in a joint statement that they, along with their clients, planned to inspect the Mississippi Barrier Island as they began investigating Nolan's death on behalf of their clients, Warren Hudson, Jax Patalo, and Morgan Seymour. They went back to the island with their clients, voluntarily, to do their own investigation. They stressed they wouldn't be gathering evidence during the visit, saying the purpose was to understand the island's layout and dynamics. Paltzik needed to lay eyes on the island himself. Now pause on that, because that is a very precise distinction. We are going to the scene, but we are not gathering evidence. We want to understand the layout, but nothing we do there is evidentiary. Notice this. That is not the language of people who are scared. That is the language of people who are constructing a narrative, a counter-narrative, a legal strategy that is public-facing, media-aware, and moving fast. And the attorney they brought in to help build it is not just any defamation lawyer. The Friends recently brought Edward Andrew Paltzik, a defamation attorney who has represented President Donald Trump in high-profile media battles, onto their legal team as they push back against allegations surrounding Nolan's death. That is a very specific kind of attorney. Someone who knows how to win public opinion battles. Someone who knows how to make the story about the accusers, not the accused. Think about what that means. This is not a quiet, defensive legal posture. This is a deliberate, aggressive, public relations-aware legal campaign, and it is aimed, in part, at you, at the people watching this video, at anyone who has said anything online about what might have happened on that island. Cox and Paltzik said they were proud to stand with and fight for three completely innocent young men, insisting Warren, Jax, and Morgan had nothing whatsoever to do with the tragic death of Nolan Wells. And they're putting anyone who's publicly accused the trio on notice, saying they're combing through mainstream and social media coverage for allegedly defamatory statements. Combing through mainstream and social media for defamatory statements. That means someone right now is cataloging what people have said on TikTok, on YouTube, on X, building a file, building a case. And that tells us something critical about what the Friends side believes the risk actually is. Because you don't hire a former Trump defamation attorney and announce you're scanning social media, unless the legal threat you're preparing is real, unless you have a strategy, unless you believe you can win. Now, to be absolutely fair here, and we have to be, nothing about lawyering up indicates guilt. Nothing about preparing defamation suits means these three young men had anything to do with Nolan's death. The right to legal representation is foundational, and the harassment and threats they say they have received, if accurate, are serious. Hudson, Pitalo, and Seymour were part of a Give Send Go fundraiser, claiming that they have been targeted with death threats and defamation as the case intensifies. 3 people have been charged with threatening a judge, a witness, and local officials connected to the investigation into the death of Nolan Wells. None of the 3 appear to know Wells, his family, or the boating group, or be part of the investigation. So actual charges for actual threats against people connected to this case, from people who don't even know the families involved. That is how wide and how volatile this case has become, and it matters, because it is the environment in which this legal counteroffensive is being launched. The threats came amid rampant speculation and scrutiny of the investigation, deepened in part by uncertainty surrounding Wells's final hours, distrust of law enforcement, and the state's long history of racist violence. The teenager, who was black, had traveled to the uninhabited island with a group of friends from high school, all of whom were white. That is the context this case lives inside. That is why the internet caught fire. That is why a death investigation in Mississippi, involving a black teenager who did not return from an island with his white friends, became national news within days. And now, that same case is producing defamation lawsuits, counter-investigations, a trip back to the island, and a bombshell claim about a phone. Here is where we slow down, because the phone claim from attorney Tyler Cox is the single most important development in this case right now. And we need to be precise about what was said and what was not said. Cox did not say the family hid the phone. He did not say the family tampered with evidence. He said, publicly, that he does not believe the Jackson County Sheriff's Office has had access to Nolan's phone, and he staked his professional reputation on it. Friends of Nolan Wells, including Warren Hudson, Jax Pitalo, and Morgan Seymour, maintain their innocence in the matter, with their attorney stating that there were no missing messages or photos from Wells' phone. How does he know that? That is the question. If the Friends side has seen the contents of Nolan's phone, either directly or through discovery, and they're making that claim on record, that is a statement that can and will be tested. That is not something you say carelessly when you are represented by attorneys who specialize in high-stakes litigation. But here is the counter to that. Attorney Eric Hertz said discussions continue regarding a joint forensic examination of cell phones connected to the case, an inspection he expects would include the FBI if it proceeds. Discussions continue about a joint forensic examination, including potentially the FBI. That language tells you something important. A joint examination has not happened yet. The phones, plural, have not all been forensically examined together. That process is still being negotiated. So the question is not simply, does the sheriff's office have the phone? The question is, what is on the phone, whose phone matters most, and who gets to look at it, and when? Those are three completely different questions. And right now, based on what has been publicly disclosed, only pieces of each have been answered. Now let's talk about the independent autopsy, because this is where the evidentiary picture gets complicated, and where the friends' lawyers may be gambling on something specific. The preliminary independent autopsy lists Nolan Wells' cause of death as undetermined, while authorities have not publicly disclosed the results of the state autopsy. Undetermined. That word is doing a lot of work right now. Ben Crump announced July 22 that the cause and manner of death in that autopsy had been listed as undetermined, noting that it didn't appear that Nolan had suffered any fractures or deep tissue injuries. No fractures, no deep tissue injuries, and yet, undetermined. Not drowning, not accidental. Undetermined. There were no immediate, obvious signs of foul play or trauma on Wells's body, but due to the uncertain circumstances, the coroner said they asked for an autopsy at the state medical examiner's office so that they could do the full autopsy and be able to tell if there was any foul play or trauma. So here is where we are, forensically. The official state autopsy has been completed, but its results have not been released to the public. The independent autopsy says undetermined. The coroner says no obvious signs of foul play, and Nolan's family and their attorneys say the circumstances do not add up. Notice this. Forensic audio specialists are reviewing the complete CTO emergency call from July 4th. Ocean engineering experts are examining how Wells's body ultimately came to be recovered near the northwestern tip of Horn Island. Ben Crump said, "We want to know how is that possible with the oceanic tides." Crump said, "You've got low tides and high tides, so it's not adding up." Discussions also continue regarding a joint forensic examination of cell phones connected to the case. The family side is questioning the physics, the location where the body was found. Does it match where someone in the water would naturally end up, given the tides on that day? That is not a rhetorical question. That is something ocean engineering experts are actively modeling. Whether those models support the official story or challenge it, we do not yet know. That analysis has not been publicly released. But the fact that it is happening, that Crump's team hired ocean engineers to reconstruct tidal movement, tells you exactly what the family believes, and it tells you what they are building toward. And that brings us to the most important legal development, one that almost got buried beneath all the defamation headlines. While investigators have said drowning is suspected, they haven't released an official cause of death, and the case remains under investigation. Wells's family has pushed back on the claim that he voluntarily stayed behind on the island, and they've hired Crump to conduct a separate investigation into the teenager's death. 2 investigations, running simultaneously, one by law enforcement, one by the family's legal team, and now, a third, by the friend's legal team. 3 investigations, on the same island, in the same case, with potentially competing interests in what the evidence says. Does this look like a case that is winding down? Or does it look like a case that is about to get significantly more complicated? That is not a rhetorical question. That is the state of the Nolan Wells investigation as of right now. And there is one more detail, planted in the record, that we need to sit with before we go any further. According to the Give Send Go for Wells's friends, since the beginning of the investigation, these young men have cooperated with authorities, turned over all the information they had, and provided an overwhelming number of witnesses accounting for their whereabouts. An overwhelming number of witnesses accounting for their whereabouts. That is a specific claim, and it is a claim that has not been tested in court. It has not been cross-examined. It has not been placed against whatever the Jackson County Sheriff's Office has gathered independently. Whether a grand jury or a jury of 12 sees it the same way, that question remains completely open. Now let's bring in someone who understands what all of this looks like from the inside, because the legal architecture being built around this case, on both sides, is not accidental, and there is a very specific reason why it matters. Former prosecutors who have looked at cases like this one have pointed out something important. When you have an active death investigation, no charges, no arrests, no official cause of death, and you simultaneously have multiple legal teams conducting their own parallel investigations, you create an evidence problem. Not a political problem, an evidentiary one. Because every expert you hire, every scene visit you conduct, every statement you make publicly, all of it becomes discoverable. All of it can be used, by both sides, in whatever proceeding comes next. Think about the mechanics of that for a second. The friends' attorneys went to Horn Island. They said they were not gathering evidence, but they were also building a first-person understanding of the terrain. And if this case ever reaches a courtroom, whether civil or criminal, their presence on that island will be part of the record. Their observations will be part of the record. The things they said to the media on the way back will be part of the record. That is not a mistake made by accident. That is a strategy being executed by people who have done this before. And then there is the forensic pathologist. Forensic pathologist Dr. Roger A. Mitchell Jr., who performed the independent autopsy, identified several limitations that create barriers to establishing a definitive cause and manner of death. The most significant limitation, he wrote, was the inability to directly observe the airway and lungs for water, and to directly observe the stomach for gastric contents. Read that twice. The doctor could not confirm drowning, because he could not directly examine the lungs for water. That is the single most important organ in a drowning death, and in this independent autopsy, conducted in Washington, D.C., weeks after Nolan's body was recovered, that confirmation was not possible. Mitchell said in his report that the most significant limitation in the independent autopsy was the inability to directly observe the airway and lungs for water, and directly observe the stomach for gastric contents. This information is especially important for those deaths of persons who can swim, as is the case with Nolan Wells, the pathologist wrote. He flagged it specifically. Because Nolan Wells could swim, that matters forensically. A strong swimmer who drowns, voluntarily or involuntarily, leaves specific markers in the body, markers that need to be confirmed through direct examination, and in this case, that confirmation window is gone. Whether the state autopsy captured those markers before the independent examination occurred, that is a question that only the grand jury will likely be able to answer fully. The Office of District Attorney Angel Myers McElrath confirmed the autopsy report of Nolan Wells's death will be withheld until a grand jury can review it. Every death in the county, except those of natural causes and non-criminal car wrecks, is presented to your grand jury, McElrath said. Withheld, until the grand jury reviews it. That is a legal protection of the evidence, not a cover-up. It is standard procedure in Mississippi. But it also means that the public, the family, and the friends' legal teams are all operating right now without the single most important document in this case, the official state autopsy, the one conducted first, before the body was moved, before time had passed, before the limitations that Dr. Mitchell documented. That document exists, it has been completed, and no one outside of law enforcement and the DA's office has seen it. Whether what's inside that document supports or complicates the picture being painted by both sides, nobody on the outside knows yet. And that is exactly the kind of unknown that turns a case like this into a war. Notice this. We now have, running simultaneously, a Jackson County Sheriff's investigation, a parallel investigation by Ben Crump's legal team, a parallel investigation by the Friends legal team, a forensic audio review of the Sea-Tow emergency call, an ocean engineering analysis of the tidal movements near Horn Island, and a pending joint forensic examination of cell phones that may or may not include FBI involvement. A newly completed independent analytical review of photographs, videos, GPS coordinates, and witness accounts concludes that the available evidence still leaves a material gap in the timeline between Wells's last independently corroborated sighting and the return of the boats. Civil rights attorney Ben Crump said his legal team continues to pursue its own investigation, noting that forensic audio specialists are reviewing the complete Sea-Tow emergency call from July 4th, while ocean engineering experts are examining how Wells' body ultimately came to be recovered near the northwestern tip of Horn Island. A material gap. That phrase is doing enormous work. It is the language of an investigative review, not speculation, not social media theory. It means that independent analysts looking at photographs, videos, GPS data, and witness accounts, could not connect the dots between when Nolan was last seen and when those boats left. That gap exists in the record, and it has been formally documented. Whether the grand jury sees that material gap as investigatively significant, or whether the state autopsy fills it, that is the question this entire case is moving toward. But here is what the friend's side would say to that. And we have to give it its fair weight. The attorneys stated, "We don't know how Nolan Wells died, but what we do know beyond any doubt is this. Warren, Jax, and Morgan had nothing whatsoever to do with Nolan's death." That is a carefully worded statement. Notice what they did not say. They did not say they know what happened. They said they know their client's role in it. That is a legally precise distinction, and it is the distinction that a defamation lawsuit would hinge on, because you cannot defame someone by asking questions, but you can defame them by stating false facts as true. Pulsick said the attorneys have identified 2 people they believe made defamatory statements about the teens. He declined to name them, citing legal and security concerns, but said more people could be added to the list. 2 people, named internally, not named publicly yet, and the list is open, meaning the legal strategy here is not concluded, it is expanding. Benjamin Hudson wrote on the Give Send Go platform, "This is not about silencing legitimate discussion or respectful disagreement. People are free to ask questions and express opinions. This is about drawing a line against defamation, targeted harassment, threats of violence, doxing, intimidation, and coordinated campaigns that destroy lives before the facts are known." That is the line the friend's side is drawing. Questions, acceptable. False statements of fact, actionable. And to be completely fair, that distinction matters, because what has happened to these 3 young men online has included things that go far beyond legitimate inquiry. Real threats, real harassment. A California man was arrested for threatening a judge. 3 people have been criminally charged in connection with this case, none of them connected to Nolan, his family, or the investigation. A California man was arrested after authorities say he sent messages to Judge Ashley Cole, Warren's stepmother, threatening her and her children. That is not accountability, that is chaos, and it is the kind of chaos that makes it harder, not easier, to find out what actually happened to Nolan Wells. Now here is where we sit with the legal status as it stands today, and this is important. Because in all the noise, the actual legal architecture of this case has gotten blurry. No charges have been filed in connection with Nolan Wells's death. No arrests have been made. The cause and manner of death remain officially undetermined, pending the state autopsy results. Once the Jackson County Sheriff's Department investigation into Wells' death is complete, the Jackson County DA's office has confirmed it will present the case to a grand jury. The DA's office said convening a grand jury does not mean there is any criminality, and is standard procedure for most unnatural or suspicious deaths in the county. Let that land. Standard procedure. A grand jury does not mean charges. It does not mean an indictment. It means a group of citizens will look at the evidence and decide whether what law enforcement has built is enough to support criminal charges, or whether there is insufficient evidence to proceed. Crump confirmed, saying, "We also agreed that we would have a mutual inspection of the cell phone with our experts and their experts." Attorney Eric Hertz is helping lead the investigation team, with former law enforcement experts who are going to help with the cell phone download, so everybody will be able to see at the same time what the cell phone has. Everybody sees it at the same time. That is a significant concession from all sides. It means the joint phone examination, when and if it proceeds, will be witnessed simultaneously. No one gets to see it first. No one gets to shape the narrative before the other side knows what the evidence contains. And that is exactly why Tyler Cox's public statement about the phone, his willingness to stake his reputation on what he believes about it, is either a very confident gamble or a very calculated piece of pressure. We do not know which one yet. On July 10th, the family held a press conference in New York alongside Crump and civil rights activist Reverend Al Sharpton, who has since teamed with NFL Hall of Famer Terrell Owens and filmmaker Tyler Perry, to offer up $125,000 for any information leading to an arrest and conviction related to Wells's death. $125,000 for information leading to an arrest and conviction. That is a reward that assumes a crime was committed. The family believes one was. The friends' attorneys say none was. And the grand jury, whenever it convenes, will have to decide which version of this story the evidence actually supports. The Congressional Black Caucus is amplifying the family's calls for an independent investigation, saying in a statement, "Too many questions remain unanswered." Too many questions remain unanswered. That is not rhetoric. That is the formal position of elected members of Congress. And it is the position shared by Nolan's mother. Crump said, "Nolan's family still has no answers about how their son went to Horn Island and never came home. A thorough investigation must be completed, and the district attorney must put every relevant fact before the grand jury. Nothing held back. Nothing overlooked. Nothing held back. Nothing overlooked." That is what Christine Wansley is asking for. Not a predetermined verdict. Not a specific suspect named before the evidence is heard. A process, thorough, transparent, complete, that treats her son's life as something worth fully accounting for. Meanwhile, a GoFundMe for the family of Wells has raised more than $810,000 since it was created on July 6th, the day that the teenager was discovered dead. $810,000 from strangers, from people across the country who looked at this case and felt something shift in their chest. That number does not tell us what happened on Horn Island, but it tells us how many people are watching, and it tells us that the weight of this case, the weight of Nolan Wells's life, is being felt far beyond Ocean Springs, Mississippi. The district attorney acknowledged, "Our community is grieving the tremendous loss of Nolan Wells, who is loved and treasured by everyone. Nolan's family deserves answers, and our community deserves answers." Nolan Wells was a wide receiver, a football player at Southwest Mississippi Community College, a kid who, according to his father, loved to put in the work because he wanted to be the best. His father said, "He loved to put in the work because he wanted to be the best. He wanted to make me and his mother proud." He added, "We're going to keep pushing and fighting until we find answers." That is who this case is about, not the lawyers, not the social media theories, not the defamation lawsuits, not the counter-investigations. A boy who went to an island on the 4th of July and did not come home. And his father, who is still pushing, still fighting, still asking the question that no one has fully answered. The question we started with today. Not what happened on Horn Island. Everybody's asking that. The question is this. When the grand jury convenes, when the state autopsy is finally placed in front of 12 citizens in Jackson County, Mississippi, when the phone data is examined simultaneously by every legal team in this case, will the evidence that exists tell a coherent story? Or will the material gap still be there? We do not know yet, and anyone who tells you they do is not giving you the truth. They are giving you a version of it. This channel will keep following this case until there are real answers. The grand jury, the phone examination, the state autopsy results, the defamation lawsuits. Every development, sourced, verified, and straight to you. If this case matters to you, subscribe, turn on the notification bell, because the next update in this case could come any day, and when it does, you will want to be here. Now I want to hear from you. The friend's attorney staked his professional reputation on a claim about Nolan Wells's phone. The family's side says a joint forensic examination, potentially including the FBI, is still being negotiated. Given everything you've heard today, what stands out to you most? Leave it in the comments. I read every single one,